Sometimes preparation for these videos can be a little intense. I almost abandoned this project. The real stories of people's very real struggles documented in Bruce Feiler's book, Life is in the Transitions, were gut-wrenching. Perhaps it was a case of too much in too short a time frame, but I felt I couldn't take much more. But like the author's contention about the shape of modern lives, just as he plumbs the depths of our despair, he pivots away from the problem to how we survive the worst times of our lives to thrive again. I have lived my life in a fairly straight line: school, marriage, a child, a job, divorce, remarriage, and retirement. As you can see, there are some bumps along the way. But it would be an understatement to say that the shape of modern life has changed. Research shows that the generations that have followed have had to deal with many more crises. Psychologists like to call them transitions, but I think to the average person they feel like crises. And the crises are coming with greater frequency. There are the everyday crises, such as the car requiring an expensive repair, or a child moving back home, or not being able to acquire daycare. And then there are what the author calls life quakes: the death of a loved one, the loss of a job, or the loss of a home. For younger generations who are having to cope with more crises more frequently, studies have shown they're also experiencing more life quakes. And it was right here that I almost threw in the towel. They are piling up. Crisis upon life quakes upon crises. They may be dealing with 2 or 3 or even 4 at the same time. Yikes. My takeaway from all of this was we need to give them a break, not roll our eyes every time we hear of a millennial or a Gen Z moving home to deal with their mental health, or quitting their high-paying job to start their own business, or deciding to stay home to school their kids. Their lives are taking radically different shapes from our own, and they need our support. We need to advocate for public policy that supports our young adults through the rapid social change they are currently experiencing. Whether we like it or not, they are taking the road less traveled, and that road is filled with potholes, black ice, and broken guardrails. If more crises now characterize modern life, it is more important than ever that we acquire the skills to come back from major life setbacks. Is there a way to help ourselves, our children, or grandchildren come back from such heartbreaking circumstances? If you've ever experienced a life quake, you feel lost. You feel adrift with none of the guideposts on which you previously relied. You feel like you've been hit over the head with a shovel, still conscious but stunned. Getting lost is a deeply rooted human response when our life has been thrown into disarray. Getting lost is archetypal. It appears in our stories, myths, fairy tales, and legends across all cultures and time periods. Being lost puts in a state where we can reevaluate everything, our long-held values, habits, and behaviors, to judge their usefulness in our new changed circumstances. This phase of the change process has been variously described as the wilderness, the desert, the voyages to strange lands. In the novel Pride and Prejudice, Miss Bennet must leave the comfort of her friends and family before she can return home with a fresh perspective on the haughty Mr. Darcy. The purpose of the mazes of the great cathedrals of Europe was to disorient the traveler and necessitating them to wander so that they may emerge with a new way of seeing. So as painful as this part of the process may seem, it is necessary that those who are able to navigate this messiness are more resilient to the ravages of change. So although excruciatingly painful at times, in order to successfully adapt to a landslide of change, we must sort through the rubble to jettison what doesn't serve us anymore and keep what does. Hitting the restart button is the key to thriving when life throws its slings and arrows. The tricksters of legend, Raven, Coyote, Hermes, Loki, Anansi, and Briar Rabbit, brought upheaval upon the heads of unwitting heroes so that it was necessary for them to rethink their situation. The hero then returned to their homeland with new ways of thinking. All of this is to say, is crises that force us to reevaluate whether or not our long-held comfortable behaviors and beliefs are still serving us, has been etched into our collective memories over the millennia. Easy Easy to say, shit happens, and it has been happening for a long time. But how do we get back to a life of meaning? Interestingly, many people turn to creative pursuits to find their path through the debris of their old lives. They write and dance and paint and sew and quilt, compose, cook, garden, drum, and strum. As it turns out, bursts of novelty and invention emerge in times of rupture. People often reignite an old passion to reinvent themselves. The pandemic was a lifequake of major proportions. I know exactly when it began for me. I was playing a curling game when we were told to go home and isolate. Confined to our home, I looked for ways to cope in this new reality. I began to excavate my past for dormant interests. I had always wanted to paint. I had dabbled during another quake in my life, retirement, but as public spaces closed and sense of panic closed in, I brought out the brushes again. One of my paintings took the 2 years that COVID encompassed and still sits against the wall near my desk, unfinished. I entitled it Fearless, a young woman in a small sailboat battling the forces of the wind and waves. I didn't realize it at the time, but it seems I had embedded my COVID experience in my painting. I had loved sewing as a youth, but lacked the discipline required to complete a project using a pattern. My home economics teacher was severe and mistakes resulted in poor grades. Without the oversight of a teacher evaluating my efforts, I turned to sewing without the constraints of proper technique. Originally, textile shops were closed, so I decided I would refashion clothing I already had. Taking a thrifted men's wool and cashmere coat, I cut it down to fit. I sewed denim on the pockets and adding sashiko stitching. I spent a good amount of time researching this technique through books ordered online. Amazon at the time seemed like one of those few links we had to the outside world. When a package landed on our door, it was excitement akin to opening a gift at Christmas. I trimmed the opening of the coat with denim and sewed a patch on the back, constructed the zipper from the jeans, and the project was done. It had taken me hours of thinking and rethinking and reworking. It is an accomplishment of which I'm still proud. So there you have it. Being able to bounce back from crisis requires us to accept that our old life is not coming back, reevaluate what is no longer working for us, and create a new life in line with our new realities. With little to lose, released from the constraints of our old lives, new ideas pop and crackle. We seize on these ideas to reimagine a new life for ourselves. In the depths of our despair, new solutions arise that allow us to find our way to greater meaning in our rejuvenated life. And sorry about that turn into the nerdy archetype stuff. That was for me. I love the idea that embedded in stories and poems is ancient wisdom that remains relevant for the modern world, that our ancestors from 2,000 years ago are whispering to us from across millennia. As always, I would love to hear your stories of time when you have hit refresh and how it helped you through a transition. In the meantime, fair winds, my friends.